Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, to the Baizhu pre-release! Woohoo! Baiju's a pretty interesting character, and here I am using interesting as the catch-all term, not as actually all that interesting, but we'll get into that. Yeah, I mean, we can get started right away. So, first off, 13.3k base HP with HP% Ascension. Now, because he's a character that, as we're going to be seeing later, has a decent amount of HP scalings, we can try to put that in context, right? So if we look at base stats, Genshin, if we sort by base HP, the HP scalers, right? Dea, Nilo, Hu Tao, generally have more, right? So 15k. Closer to the range of what Kokomi has. It's still more than enough HP for what he's gonna do, as we're gonna get into later. But yeah, so decently high base HP. His base attack is pretty low. His base defense is actually incredibly low. So if you look at characters' base defense, the lowest that we have right now in the game is Yelan. Even if you do build him HP, that doesn't necessarily mean that like he'll be able to tank, like face tank everything without taking damage. Like his defense is pretty low, so his ability to tank big hits will still not be like the most insane, but it's not that big of a deal because you're still gonna get more than enough HP from your build. He is a catalyst, which means Dendro infused normal attacks. Woohoo, that's crazy, right? Well, yeah, it's nice, but as you can see from his normal attack animations, his range is very, very small, right? He's like Hazo, but with way, way, way smaller AoE, right? Like he's basically just boop, boop. He just boops the enemies, and he doesn't actually like have AoE, right? With his normal attacks. His normal attacks are melee and single target, which is kind of like a polearm character basically, but with no slashing attacks. So all in all, like the Dendro infusion is good, but it's definitely not like a reliable source of Dendro application if you're in AoE situations. E, Universal Diagnosis. Controls a Gossamer Sprite that cruises and attacks nearby opponents, dealing Dendro damage after it performs 3 attacks, or if there are no opponents nearby, the sprite will return healing party members based on Baiju's max HP. So, basically, it hits 3 times, and then it heals you. The hits happen pretty fast. If I remember correctly, there is ICD on them, so you only apply Dendro once from this. And the healing on it is actually pretty big, right? Like, this is a pretty large amount of healing on, like, a single hit elemental skill, or a single instance elemental skill, right? So he has 13,348 base HP. So if you build him triple HP, which we'll get into whether or not that's doable, but you got the HP% Ascension, you got some substats, 5,000 flat. You can reach like 45k HP-ish. You don't really want to go healing bonus for reasons we'll get into later on your circlet. And when it comes to artifact sets, you can go healing bonus, but generally you'll have better options. So usually you don't have any actual healing bonus. You do get some potential healing bonus if your active character is low, but yeah. Without that, he's healing at a baseline at level 9 for almost an 8k heal on an elemental skill on your whole party, which is good, especially on a skill with a 10-second cooldown. Now, I'm going to be comparing him to Yao Yao a lot in this video because he's a Dendro healer, and Yao Yao is also a Dendro healer. So in a lot of teams, if you want a Dendro healer, you'll be choosing between the two. Yao Yao's elemental skills healing is pretty bad, but her elemental burst healing is really, really good. Her downside is that you need to actually use your elemental burst, right? And you need to actually stay on her after you do. If you do though, the healing that you get is quite a lot more than what you'll get from Baizhu. That being said though, 8k-ish healing on your skill is generally going to be more than enough to keep your team healthy. Now let's move on to the burst. Holistic Revive enters the pulsing clarity state, creating a seamless shield that absorbs Dendro damage with 250% effectiveness. While in this state, Baizhu will generate a new seamless shield every 2.5 seconds. Oh, so he's a shielder, right? Let's take a look at how big his shield is, yeah. 156 plus 1.36% of max HP, which, if you notice, is just the healing on his skill, but divided by 10. Oh, he shields you for 700. That's like half a Hilly Turtle's arrow. His shield is trash. However, that does not mean that it's useless. The thing about small shields like that is they don't actually help you mitigate damage all that much, but if you have a healer on your team and you're not like getting hit by attacks that one-shot you from full health, like that's not that big of a deal. The main upside that a small shield that can be generated often, which as we'll read in just a second, you can generate this shield pretty often, is that you'll spend a reasonable amount of time shielding. shielded. Now the thing is, when you have a shield, no matter how small it is, you basically are invulnerable to interruption. So if you look at Toma's burst at talent level 4 is a shield that's about the same amount as Baizhu, right? On each time you attack. The thing about Toma is his shield can stack with itself. With Baizhu, his shield cannot stack with itself. And Toma also gets a shield from another place. But point being, right, I want to show you guys what happens with a shield like this. A shield that is small. I'm not going to use a skill just to make sure that the shield is small. And yeah, I'm taking damage. But I'm not getting interrupted. And that's what a small shield that gets refreshed often can do for you. It's effectively just a fancy way of getting resistance to interruption. In Toma's case, he can also have that shield stack with itself to actually get a real shield, but you can still showcase the mechanic of having a small refreshing shield just by using Toma's burst without a skill, and that's just what I wanted to do here. So effectively, right, is just a small, nice little added upside, but just keep in mind that it's not an actual shield. Baizhu is not a shielder. He's not a unit that will give you an actual reasonable shield. The shield is a joke. Don't rely on that part too much. However, the Seamless Shield will heal your active character based on Baiju's max HP and attack opponents by unleashing Spirit Veins, dealing dendro damage under the following circumstances. When a character is under the protection of a Seamless Shield and a new one is generated, or when the shield's effect expired, or when it is shattered. Right? In other words, right, his shield gets generated every 2.5 seconds, you heal, and you deal some dendro damage. Important to note, the dendro damage is not really AoE. Like, it has a very, very small AoE, but it's effectively single target. That is, as we're going to see, his biggest weakness. He's got some strengths, he's got some weaknesses, but his main weakness is how single target locked he is. Right? Like I said earlier, we're gonna compare him to Yao Yao a lot, and that's the main thing that Yao Yao has over him, is that Yao Yao works significantly better at a baseline in AoE situation than he does. Anyways, let's keep going. Baizhu gains different effects according to the current HP of your active character. When their HP is less than 50%, he gains healing bonus, and when their HP is equal to or more than 50%, he gains dendro damage bonus. His Ascension 4 passive, characters who are healed by Seamless Shields, which is his burst. Characters healed by his burst will gain the Year of Verdant Favor effect. Each 1,000 max HP that Baizhu possesses that does not exceed 50,000 will increase the Burning, Bloom, Hyper Bloom, and Burgeon reaction damage dealt by these characters by 2%, and the Aggravate and Spread reaction damage by 0.8%. So, at the 45k-ish HP that we had earlier, that would be about 90% on Bloom damage and about 40% on Aggravate damage and Spread damage. This is nice. The biggest thing about this is only to the active character that gets healed by his burst, so you can't expect to have it instantly when you swap into a character. It also seems to be an additive buff, meaning that it's not gonna actually, like, if you're doing 20k without him and you increase it by 90%, you're not gonna be doing like 38k. It's just gonna add onto the EM multiplier that you already have. All in all, you can kind of think of this as like Nahida's burst that gives EM, but only for the dendro reactions and a little bit worse, generally. It can be a tiny little bit better in some circumstances, but yeah. The important part is this is to your active character, but it lasts for 6 seconds, so you can kind of use it in quick swap teams to give it to more than one character or to give it to an off-field character, but you'll need to swap back into the character that wants the buff pretty often if you do that. And by far the most important part of his kit, when Baizhu is in the party, interacting with certain harvestable items will heal your current active character for 2.5% of his max HP. Wow, very cool. Basically, right, if we do a quick rundown of what he does, he's got solid healing, nothing that's like gonna insta max full heal your team just like that, but healing that should generally be more than enough for most. He's got res to interruption through his like quote unquote shields. Off field single target dendro application one time every 2.5 seconds, which is okay. It is not 100% uptime though, so do keep that in mind, right? It's 14 seconds of uptime, so these are Nice. Like these are useful things. Like the parts of this that are good is you've got off-field dendro application, which is obviously really nice. Resistance interruption is useful for quite a lot of characters, and just in general is just useful to have. And healing for many people is very, very nice, if not necessary. He does have some issues though. His particle generation, if I remember correctly, is 3.5. If you do 2 skills per rotation, it can be kind of reasonable. But here's the thing, right? This character, good way to look at it is his burst is more expensive than Yelan, and he generates less particles than Yelan. His ER requirements are going to be pretty rough, to the point where when you play him in solo Dendro, it won't feel good. It's not going to be necessary to play him with another Dendro character, but it is going to be something that'll make him significantly more comfortable to play. So, energy, quote-unquote, problems. So that's a thing that, like, you're going to have to be careful with. And because of that, there's a pretty solid incentive to play him in double Dendro teams, right? So along with a unit like Nahida, for example. What else? I mean, it is very single target, right? Another good thing that he has going for him is the reaction buff. But the downside related to that is reaction buff only for active character. It does linger, it does last 6 seconds, so like, you can kind of cheat out a little bit of that on non-active characters, but mainly it's on the active character. Okay, Constellations. Universal Diagnosis gains 1 additional charge. That's his skill. It makes it easier to heal a bunch like in one go, which is nice. It's like Yelan, right? It's literally just the same as the Yelan C1, in the sense that it doesn't increase the limit of skills you can use per rotation. It's still 2 per rotation, but it makes it a lot easier to use 2 skills per rotation, and it makes it so that if you're using a unit like Sino that needs a lot of field time, you don't have to swap out of that Sino to use your second skill per rotation, right? Because usually in Sino teams at C0 you'd only be able to use 1 skill per rotation, whereas at C1 you'd be able to use 2, because you don't want to swap out of Sino. All in all, it's fine. It helps his ER requirements, but honestly, it's not like he's doing that much damage, and it's not like his buff is all that massive either. So having to run more ER instead of HP isn't even that big of like a cost, right? Unlike Yelan, where if you're not running ER, you're running damage. Well, with him, if you're not running ER, you're running HP, and HP is not that much of a buff, and also not that much more healing. So I'd say that his C1 is a lot less valuable than something like Yelan C1. C2! C2 makes him a character that you don't even swap into anymore. C2, when your own active character hits a nearby opponent with their attacks, Baizhu will unleash Gossamer Sprites twice. It will initiate 1 attack before returning, dealing dendro damage and healing based like on what your E does. It's considered elemental skill damage, and it happens once every 5 seconds. There's no condition on this. This just happens if he's in your party, whether you swap into him or not. So you can just not swap into him, which is funny. It's a pretty good con. It helps his dendro app. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know if it's like how big the AoE of it is, but usually when it's actually reasonable AoE size, they say dealing AoE damage. They don't just say dealing damage, so I wouldn't expect the AoE to be all that great. C3 and C5, I don't know which one's which. I'm guessing right now this is burst, this is skill. They don't matter much. Burst talent levels only help with the damage of the burst, which isn't that much, and the shield and healing of the burst, which like the shielding at level 9 or at level 12, it won't change shit. And the healing at level 9 is already enough. Honestly, same for the skill. Healers generally don't need talent levels because you're probably healing more than you need to already. It's not like damage where more damage is always good. Healing, like you have a certain max HP, and once you're already fully healed, then healing more doesn't do shit. C4, for 15 seconds after holistic revivification is used, Baizhu will increase all nearby party members' EM by 80. That's fine. And then C6, increase damage dealt by burst by 8% of his max HP. Additionally, when his elemental skill or C2 hits opponents, it will give you an additional burst proc, which is nice. It's more dendro app, it's more damage, but honestly, this is not the kind of constellation that's like gonna make him go to be like, wow. This doesn't really have much of a wow factor among C6s. This is not looking too good. I'm too lazy to calc it properly, so take that with a grain of salt, but like, I just don't give a shit about this C6. It doesn't look that great, and it's like, it's a well thing. Not a fan, but hey, bad Constellation 6s mean that less people spend money, I guess. So that's nice, actually. If you really, really want to get Constellations for him, probably don't go anything past C2, but even then, C2 is not necessary. Difference between C0 and C2 just isn't even that big. Let's do the usual weapon stats, all that stuff. So his damage on his skill, it hits 3 times at 134.6 scaling. The burst hits every 2.5 seconds, so it's like 6-7 times at 165% scaling. His damage, not the greatest. So let's take a look at the catalysts that we have and which ones can work well with that. The Floating Dreams is like, it's gonna work and all, but all you really get from it is buffing your party's EM by 40. The stats on him really don't do that much because he just doesn't do much damage. Oh yeah, we can talk about TTDS as well. So honestly, no. I'm just gonna fucking remove it altogether. Fuck that. Everlasting Moonglow. Like, you can use it, I guess, if you unfield him, but like, just don't. Okay, his signature. For 3 seconds after you use burst or create a shield, you gain an effect, and it refreshes whenever you use burst or create a shield. And while you're under that effect, every 2.5 seconds, you restore 4.5 energy and gain 0.3% elemental damage bonus for every 1000 max HP up to 12%. The second part is for the damage, but honestly, like I said, it just doesn't really matter that much because his damage is a bit of a joke. So the main part about it is that it's an HP substat catalyst that restores 4.5 energy every 2.5 seconds while his burst is active, right? So that's like maybe 6 up to 7 times. Probably just gonna be 6. That's a decent amount of energy, right? It's like around 27, maybe 31.5. But that should go to show you that, yeah, he is going to be energy hungry. Anyways, Wandering Even Star, it's fine, but he doesn't care about the EM all that much. There's gonna be some teams where, like, if you play him in Quicken, the EM isn't useless, but it's just not that great either, and the bonus attack on him doesn't do that much either, so it's just, don't play it. Hakushin! Hakushin gives you some ER and gives you effectively electro damage bonus if you trigger Quicken with him, but only if you trigger it on field. And so, because of that, it's really not something you want to be going for. Prototype Amber, woohoo! At Refine 1, it restores 12 energy. At Refine 5, it restores 18 energy, as well as healing your other party members for 18% HP. So it's 2/3 of the energy generated by his signature on top of also having almost as much HP and healing your party from the effect. Honestly, Prototype Amber is about as good as his signature. Signature, but not minus $200. Right, because yes, he can have a little bit of damage and his signature helps with that a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to the actual output that your team is going to do, it's just such a small portion of your team DPS that it just doesn't matter that much. Like the main difference between Prototype Amber and his signature is the 9 additional, or a little bit more, additional energy that you get from it. Okay, Fav, obviously, Fav is Fav. Fav is always a good option because he does want to build a large amount of HP. Prototype Amber actually does have its advantages over Fav, but I would still probably prefer using Fav over the Prototype Amber or his signature in any teams where the rest of your team is energy hungry. So if you do end up playing him with a unit like Sino, for example, Fav is probably worth it. Sak, fine for overworld stuff. It gets you a lot of healing quickly, but like, meh. Honestly, just don't even consider it. And then finally, TDDS, it's fine. It's rough to meet your ER requirements in solo Dendro if you end up using TDDS. And also, in a lot of the Dendro teams, there's not a unit that like cares for the TDDS 48% attack buff all that much, because a lot of damage dealers in Dendro teams do care about attack, but they also care about other stats in ways that make attack a bit less valuable. So all in all, it's fine. As a general rule, right, if I were to rank his weapons, I would probably put Fav. Technically, Jadeful is better than the Prototype Amber, but in terms of like how valuable they are to have, definitely better to stick to Prototype Amber, then his signature, and then TTDS. Hi, this is following, I don't know, day, week, I don't know how long it's been, Jeff. Just here to correct a few things. First, I want to add a few things about Hakushin Ring. Hakushin Ring is overall not all that good, but there can be some teams, so if you end up playing him in Quick Swap, Quicken teams, right, something like Yai Official, for example, where Hakushin Ring having low uptime if you don't swap back into him doesn't matter as much because you can swap back into it. So that's a situation where the weapon could be a little bit better. Now, artifact stats. Before we get into that, we're gonna need to do an actual ER requirement, ER calc for him. If you use 1E per rotation, which is kind of what you're gonna be forced to do in some teams, like going back to what I said earlier, the Sino teams, you'll only get 3.5 particles. Let's start with solo Dendro. In a situation like this, he'd need around 270 ER, but if you end up going for Fav, it's 220, and the Fav itself is giving you a reasonable amount as well, so it's not that bad. If you end up going for Prototype Amber, his cost effectively goes down by 18. So it goes down to like 62. So as well, right? Around 210, which is a lot more reasonable. If you manage to get 2 E's in your rotation, so let's say instead of playing Sino Cookie, you're playing, or instead of Sino Official, you're playing like double Hydro and Raiden, which means that you can actually use 2 skills. And that makes your requirements start at around 220, right? If we go to Prototype Amber, it's on 170. If you play him in double Dendro with Nahida, Noyalan, 49 non-call, wait, what? Should be 4+9, my bad. Once you get to Prototype Amber, right, like this is pretty reasonable to get just from substats. If you go for Fav, the Fav ER plus substats, like this is pretty reasonable to get. There's gonna be some teams where you can get away without needing too much ER, but there will also be some teams where you're kind of gonna have to get ER sets. So when we look at artifact stats, you're gonna have to keep that in mind. So HP is one of the things you can do. General build ER, HP, if ER is needed. And then you can go for something like attack, Dendro, crit, if you end up using him as a driver for a Hyper Bloom team and you don't think that you need the healing. But again, his scalings aren't the best, so even if you do go for that, it's not gonna make that much of a difference in your team DPS. Like, it's useful, it does do damage, but it's just not what you mainly care about, right? His personal damage isn't all that great. It's not really enough to justify going for something like that. Wouldn't EM be better for aggravate damage? Yeah, but you wouldn't be on fielding him in aggravate teams. You could, if you do end up playing him in a like spread aggravate team as an off fielder with his burst, yeah, you can go EM, Dendro, crit, but also, Like, for example, right? When I say that, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I would never say, like, put attack Dendro crit as, like, the main recommendation for Yao Yao, or ER Dendro crit, but mine is on ER Dendro crit because I just don't care about the healing. She heals enough anyways. I'm too lazy to change her artifact. It doesn't do that much of a difference in, like, my clear speeds because just her scalings are just not that great, but it doesn't hurt. Like, it's whatever. You can do it. It's fine. Oh, yeah. Actually, another thing. HP, crit for Faj if needed. Artifact sets! Clam, no. You're gonna see how much he heals with his E and you're gonna be like, whoa, that's crazy. Yes, he heals a lot with his E, so you're gonna max out 1 clam proc, but his burst doesn't heal that much and his burst only heals the active character. Now, when it comes to clam, it takes all of your healing, which means that if your healing is to your whole party, then it's 4 times easier to max out the clam set. This kind of healing is just not good enough to actually get good damage out of clam. Like, you can do it, but it's not what I would recommend. 4B's Deepwood, yes, is not a set that like maximizes his healing or anything like that, but his healing is generally going to be good enough without needing a set that focuses on healing. And if you put him on Deepwood, it means that if you play him solo Dendro, well, you would want him on Deepwood, and if you play him in like in a double Dendro team, it lets you go for like Gilded on your other Dendro character, right? Which is nice. If you already have someone else with Deepwood on your team, or if you're playing an aggravate team where he's the only Dendro unit, so the Deepwood doesn't actually do that much because you're not increasing anyone's damage, what other options can you go for? Well, kind of just any of the support sets. 4B's Instructor, fine. If you're playing him in a team where you can actually make use of his passive on your character that triggers reactions, 4B's Instructor is not that great because, like, yeah, it's gonna work and all, but you're going for a 4-star set, and that's gonna reduce the total amount of HP that you can get. And as such, the amount of EM that you're getting from Instructor, it's nice, but in exchange for that, you are losing a bit of your passive, and it makes your buff basically a decent amount less. It's like, Otherwise, 4B's Tenacity is fine. Honestly, the main thing is that he doesn't have a good set other than Deepwood. So I just, like, I would much prefer having him be the one on Deepwood in most teams. Right, because, like, okay, if you were to go Clam, your healing procs are for 7.4k, and you're getting 1 to 2, an average of, like, 1.5, a little bit less than that, on each Clam proc. Which means that your Clam procs are healing, or dealing 90% of this, so, like, about 7k damage. It will do some damage. The thing is, if you can't max out Clam, it's not that insane. Because the damage that you're doing with the Clam is damage that you're losing that you could be gaining from putting him on a support set. I guess I should change to Personally, I would not recommend that at all, ever. But if the white numbers make you laugh, like, I don't know, have fun, I guess. Honestly, 2-piece is fine, because you're gonna need a lot of ER. So getting like 2-piece tenacity, 2-piece emblem might actually be pretty useful in getting you to the ER requirements you need. You can go noblesse as well. All in all, he doesn't really have a good set for him, which is part of why I would generally just recommend running him on Deepwood. Yeah, I guess if you were to play him in Nilo teams, you could put him on like an EM set as well, right? I'm not gonna put that in here because I mean, you fucking know. And also because I don't really like him in Nilo teams, which is what we're getting to right now. For the clam set, I still maintain that I don't think it's like that great of a set overall, but I just wanted to mention that if you are using him with Hakushin, that can increase your clams a little bit. Now, your first clam proc from Hakushin will generally not benefit from Hakushin, because generally you cast your E and your burst close together, which means that the first tick of Hakushin will happen in the same like clam window as your skill, which max out the clam itself. Also, I'm not entirely sure that I mentioned well enough that, like, yeah, you'll usually get like 7k clam procs, but when you use your skill, you do max out your proc, right? So it is more than 7k on average per clam proc. But yeah, overall, you'll get somewhere around like 4k-ish DPS, which is not bad, but I guess it is like additional free damage if you don't need Deepwood and you don't need any of like the support sets. So that is something that you can keep in mind. So let's look at teams. Sino really likes Baizhu. There is the downside of Baizhu not really helping with Sino's ER requirements, which means that it's going to be like very much an incentive to run TF on Sino. It's going to be an incentive to get like slightly higher ER substats, which is not something that you want to have to do, but Sino can do it. It's just not ideal. And the reason for that is because, like I said, right, playing Baizhu solo Dendro is just not ideal. So you do something like double Dendro, Hyper Bloom / Quick Bloom for Sino. That would be a pretty solid team for him. You can also just play him in double Electro or double Hydro with Sino. It's also going to work. But I think that Baiju's kit has more synergy with a double Dendro variation of something like that. Although, more synergy isn't always the most important thing when it comes to the Dendro teams, just because like some units just have kits that are so strong that it's worth playing them even if their synergy is worse. But yeah. All in all, he's going to be pretty good in Sino teams. Just like straight up Hyper Bloom, Driver, he's gonna work, but like I said earlier, because his like normal attack AoE is so small, if you're ever in non-single target situations, it's not gonna feel good. He basically just doesn't have AoE, and that's actually pretty rough. When it comes to Nahida Hyper Bloom, when you're on fielding Nahida, she doesn't have like the biggest AoE, but she does have AoE on her charge attacks, a little bit of AoE on her normal attacks, and obviously great AoE on her skill. But yeah, it's gonna feel really bad in AoE situations. It's gonna work. It's gonna be good in single target, obviously. He's a healer, so it's gonna make it comfortable. But just keep in mind that you're losing the versatility, and it's really not going to be great in AoE. Next up, Burgeon teams. Don't play him in Burgeon. Burgeon teams are teams that shine in AoE. He does not shine in AoE. He doesn't have Dendro application to get Burgeon in AoE. Just don't. Nilo, please no. I can see a bit more of an argument for the Nilo teams, because even if his AoE is pretty shit, having a Dendro driver can be nice and having a healer can be nice. But honestly, there's a lot of rotational flexibility, I guess, in Nilo teams. You're rarely going to be forced to stay on one unit for a long amount of time, which means that the fact that Baizhu does his job without needing to spend much time on field, which is one of his advantages over Yao Yao, doesn't matter as much in Nilo teams. And then on top of that, Yao Yao is so much better in AoE. The way that her skill and like burst ICD works makes her really good in AoE in Nilo teams specifically, meaning that specifically in Nilo teams, like, yeah, you can make him work, but I would rather play Yao Yao any day of the week. Okay, what other teams? I guess you can look at his Quicken teams. He's decent. Quicken teams aren't like necessarily teams that want to be doing good in AoE. A lot of Quicken teams are pretty solid in single target and can be used for single target content pretty effectively, meaning that his kind of inability to be all that useful in AoE doesn't necessarily matter that much. It's still a downside, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a massive one. Obviously, he's a healer. Yao Yao can feel bad sometimes in the Quicken teams, because a pretty decent amount of the Quicken teams have units that want to spend a lot of time on field, that get rewarded for spending a lot of time on field, and so using Yao Yao's burst often just does not feel good, right? And you'd rather just do anything else. So Baiju's like lower field time requirements over Yao Yao can actually be pretty nice. Aggravate teams also often have, well, not often, also always have their on-field unit triggering either aggravate or quicken, meaning that they can actually take advantage of Baizhu's buff, like in every quicken team, as opposed to the Hyper Bloom and Virgin teams where it's not that often that your on-fielder is the one to trigger the reactions. I'll change it from decent to good, actually. Like, it's pretty good. Bloom outside of Nilo, this is not a real team. We got that out of the way. Very nice. Any sort of like hyper fridge or oven or saute stuff like that can, it's the same thing as hyper bloom stuff for Burgeon, right? It's just generally not really what you're gonna be looking for. But if it's your on-fielder that's triggering the reactions, it's pretty decent. Hytham falls into the quicken teams. He's gonna be pretty good with him. But just do keep in mind, it is single target focus. Burn Meld Ganyu. Can it work? Yeah, I guess. It'll be fine, but you'd still want to use Nahida, because as far as I'm aware, his burst is not 1.5 or 2 units of Dendro. It's only 1U. So you'd still need to use Nahida, so he'd be replacing Bennett. And his buff doesn't actually help Ganyu, because it doesn't buff Meld, and you're losing Bennett, and that's not worth it at all. So, no. But yeah, generally I'd say that he's got the most synergy for Quicken teams and Sino teams, because like Sino Hyper Bloom teams or Quick Bloom teams, because those are the teams where you don't necessarily need to have good AoE Dendro application, and your on-field character is the one to be triggering reactions. For Nilo teams, I just want to like add a little caveat to what I said. I do think that he is overall a worse option than Yao Yao for Nilo teams, but specifically when you're playing a Nilo team where you're not that focused on the AoE, right? You're just trying to get your single target. I don't think is like a good use of a Nilo team, but I know that some people want to do it anyways. If that's what you're going to be doing, then he does have over Yao Yao the advantage of giving a buff to your team. So that is a situation where he could potentially be better. But yeah, for Burnmel Ganyu, I think I just forgot that you can have 4 characters in a team, right? Because in Burnmel Ganyu, you need your Pyro, you need Nahida, and you need Ganyu. But usually the last slot would be something like a Shielder, right? Well, you can have Baizhu as your last slot. I don't know why. I think when I was looking at it initially, I was just assuming that people were gonna use an Anemo unit like Kazuha instead, which people can do, but it does make it like harder to play. Baizhu could be like a way to get a nice little brain dead version of a Burnmel Ganyu team. All in all, Baizhu is looking quite good. Like, I want to make it very clear, when I compare him to Yao Yao, Yao Yao is a very good unit. So him being an upgrade over her in some teams and a downgrade over her in others, overall I'd probably put him as about as good as Yao Yao, maybe a little bit less valuable overall because he's a 5-star, so he's less accessible, which makes like your returns on investment lower if he's as good. I'd say he's generally about as good as Yao Yao with different strengths in different situations, which is good. Like, this is definitely one of the stronger units we've had since 3.0. As a support, he's a unit that's a little bit more versatile than a lot of the carries. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's a better pull to get. Make sure that you're just not pulling for a unit just because you heard that they were good, like without thinking about it too much. He's far from a necessary unit to get. I might consider going for him if the 4 stars on his banners are 4 stars that I really want to get. But if that's not the case, I'm not gonna go for him. But he is definitely looking to be one of the better units since the start of 3.0. Dendro is just really good, and Dendro healers are always nice to get. But yeah, so all in all, solid character, a little bit boring to me, a little bit underwhelming in terms of like his kit. I kind of understand why they made his normal attacks this bad, because otherwise there would be an argument to run him over Nahida in a lot of the like on-field Dendro teams. And while it probably wouldn't necessarily be better, it would probably feel a lot better for more casual players that don't want to learn enemies' attack patterns. And they probably didn't want a character to feel better than the Archon, but it's still kind of disappointing because I'm not looking forward to testing it. I think it's going to feel really bad to actually use him on field. As usual, right? We're going to have to wait until his release to check how much we got right and how much we got wrong. Make sure you subscribe to catch the post-release that I will do while the banner is out, just to go through what I got right, what I got wrong. If you're planning on wishing for units just for how good they are, and you're using my videos as a way to gauge whether or not you want to go for a unit, just wait until the post-release always, because I'm very I'm fallible, I'm human, I make mistakes. Check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/thejeff77. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.